This conference will now be recorded.
And I'm now being recorded, I just heard. And also, please do let me know if I cut out at any time. I'm happy to repeat myself. Donovan Woolard from Open Technologies here in Vancouver. And I'll just give a very, very brief introduction to the work that we're doing in this space, and then hand over back to Janine to talk about what, the sort of the lay of the land around benchmarking, if you will. But in terms of who Open Technologies is, first and foremost, we're a hybrid social purpose organization based in Vancouver. And we, as a group of green building professionals, software developers, and mission-driven people, have spotted that there's a central information gap that prevents us from moving forward on pro-climate policies, investments in general. And so that's essentially our purpose. So we develop software tools that help the people that shape our cities, and that's all of you that are on the call today, to make more pro-climate decisions and to do so with confidence. And so whether it's policymakers, investors, the building industry, where we really put our work into action is taking really complex data sets and turning that into actionable data tools. And that's where we get some of these benefits. And so benchmarking and having usable data to inform policy, incentive design, and investment is a big, big part of what we do. We're also doing some work looking at how the market is changing for green building components in response to energy step code like we have in British Columbia and other new rules for new buildings, retrofits, etc. Because again, from a mission perspective, we want industry participants to know that as these policies shift, what are the ways that the market shift, and how can we reduce the friction to make both of those things move more quickly in a positive direction. So we're thrilled to be here talking a little bit about our work today, and we'll probably loop back to things like the BC benchmark pilot that Deborah mentioned off the top, and hope to deepen the relationship with each of you. Mm-hmm. Back to you, Janine.
Great. Yeah, so the focus of today is a bit of a deep dive into benchmarking and disclosure. And so just to start and level set and make sure we're all on the same page, our definition of benchmarking, energy benchmarking, is the process of tracking and reporting a building's energy performance over time based on the fundamental principle that building energy consumption must be measured before it can be managed. And the reason why, at a very high level, one might consider benchmarking buildings are actually major GHG emission. They're a major GHG emission component within our landscape, and so we do want to bring that information more to light and be able to impact that and reduce it. Now, energy benchmarking in 2020, I was pulling together on Friday a list of the cities and our states and our counties that are doing energy benchmarking, and it's quite a lot in the US. I think Canada is still playing a bit of catch up here, although I heard some programs that maybe aren't on my map yet. It sounds like Halifax is doing something with corporate buildings, which is awesome. So I need to add some new dots. But I just wanted to highlight that energy benchmarking and building benchmarking is definitely widespread in the States, and there's a lot of programs we can learn from. And so a few just highlights here, and I'll share the deck afterwards because I do have links in it to various different websites and reports. But I just wanted to, highlight some of our inspiration cities. Seattle has had a mandatory program running since 2016. They actually have a website with a map visualization, similar to the map visualization that we have in Grid that I'll show you later. And fun sliders where you can see, for example, in 2015, at the start of their map visualization, their median for source EUI was 93.7, and they've dropped that down to 86.6, which is great. Denver is also an inspiration city for us. They've had a mandatory program running since 2016. They have great reports with visualizations, and they detail their goals and how they're trying to achieve those goals in really clear ways. And of course, Edmonton, which we actually have on the call, Marnie, I believe. I pulled out some of my favorite snapshots from the report. They have great returning participation. They've got data around their EnergyStar score, as well as various different things like the total building size. And this one in particular, returning participants in their voluntary program decreased their total energy use by 4.3% between year 1 and year 2, which I think is fantastic, because that's already in the first 2 years seeing reductions and seeing a lot of people returning back into the program and seeing the value of the program. Now, when we talk about benchmarking and disclosure, often they get muddled all together into one concept. So I just wanted to break apart benchmarking, which is the collection of data for a portfolio of properties and measuring each property against that entire data set. Benchmarking can actually happen just within a large property management portfolio of their own buildings. But of course, when we talk about it, we're talking about it at a regional level, at a municipal level. And benchmarking, of course, requires a central place where all of that data is being stored so that you can compare each property against your data set. Disclosure, on the other hand, is the process of making that data visible and accessible to a range of stakeholders. Typically, that does include the public, and so usually for clarity, we call that public disclosure. And I just want to highlight that any municipal benchmarking program does imply that the building owners have disclosed their data to the municipality. Not all programs necessarily have a public disclosure component, or sometimes that is voluntary or considered separate from the benchmarking. It's really important to be clear when you're interacting with data like this, what will be visible to whom at what point. And so long as there's clarity throughout the process, then typically you get buy-in from building owners as far as sharing their data. What's involved in running a benchmarking and disclosure program? So I've broken it down here. We have kind of 3 users involved. Government employees typically are involved in the research, the design, and the recruitment phases. Building managers and owners, of course, in the data input component. And then program managers, which might be within the city, or with the case of Building Benchmark BC, which is a pilot we're running, we're also helping play that role. Program management would be folks who are requesting the data from the building owners, validating that data, reporting on that data, tracking consent for public disclosure if it's a voluntary program, doing that public disclosure, and then we would bring it back to the city most likely for that recognition phase. So various steps. When it comes to that overall process, I've kind of tried to highlight where you want to spend your time. And this is where, if you don't spend enough time, you can hit some hurdles here. So if it is a voluntary program, the recruitment strategy is really something that you want to focus on. And you do want to make sure you're making your recruitment strategy relevant to the building owner personas that you're approaching. So you're effectively convincing building owners of the value that they'll see from a program like this. On the other side, if it's mandatory, then the design requires some thought to ensure that all of those who are required to participate are aware that they need to participate, and they're obviously well equipped to comply with that regulation. Now, whether it is voluntary or mandatory, the data validation process, that requires some rigor, so your program results can be trusted and are actually valuable. The reporting, of course, is something you want to think about to ensure that you have data needed to actually produce reports that will help drive action. The whole point of this is to be able to drive action at the end of it. You want to make sure the data you're collecting and then reporting on is valuable with that end goal in mind. And in a voluntary program environment, we want to make sure tracking consent is very methodical and precise. So that, there are some spaces here where you do need to spend some time and put some thought into it. But at the end of the day, we really think it's worth it. If done well, the reports produced from this process enlighten both the building owners and the local government. You can design more targeted incentive programs. You can measure the results of those incentive programs, which helps you iterate and design even more effective incentives if needed. You can use that data to drive smarter investment choices. The building owners, as well as just the market in general, can also use this data if it's available to them. And then you can shape policies with information more readily available. And again, measure the effectiveness. That's a really important part of benchmarking, is being able to measure how effective you are being with your policy or your incentive. And overall, increasing energy literacy. So increasing the focus on the built space and greenhouse gases, which helps just drive reductions in those emissions and in costs. I'll pause because I've given quite a bit, and I might have heard someone on the line. Is there a question? So now I do want to speak to how Grid can help with this as well. So Grid is the tool that we made for building benchmarking and disclosure programs. And in blue at the bottom here, Grid is really well equipped to help with the requesting of data, the validation, reporting, tracking consent, and public disclosure. The tool makes that entire process much simpler and easier. So whoever your program manager ends up being, their life is a lot easier, and this is more of a breeze. And I've also highlighted with the data input, there are situations where we help with program management, so we can actually take that whole blue line out of the picture for you, and we can facilitate the building owner and the building manager with the data input as well. Not that we're doing it, but we're helping them and playing that role that the city would typically play, where you're facilitating them with that process. And that brings us to a demo. I've included a video in the slide deck. So as I said, I will send the slide deck and you'll have a little video. But today I wanted to actually show you it live. I've switched over my screen. Are you able to see now the Grid tool?
Yep, looks good.
Great. Beautiful. So Grid has a few different components to it. The dashboard here is where you would see the lay of the land for your program overall. So again, this tool is really helping with that program management component. Whoever's running the program, they're going to see all of the properties in the program and the current status of the property. And the status, this is somewhat linear, not exactly linear. My example is a voluntary program, so you can see folks who've confirmed their participation or declined to participate. We can see folks who need an ESPM profile, EnergyStar portfolio manager. They've maybe been validated already, but we're waiting for utility data, or you might be checking the utility data. In a typical program, you won't actually see such a wide range because you would spend part of the year validating the buildings and pulling them into your system and getting the building information validated, and then after the year completes, you would focus just on utility data. You'd be able to see how your program's progressing, and you can also compare to previous year's worth of data. So if you have multiple programs running, in this case I've got a 2019 in progress and a 2018 that's been completed, and you can see the difference in your program and its success. It'll also highlight some potential issues for you. But really, the main list here of properties is going to be where you're going to spend a lot of your time. The properties are all pulling in from Seed, and Seed can pull in from EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, which is definitely the most commonly used tool for building owners and building managers to manage their own portfolio. So the sync of data means you can pull in that information directly. And with EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, some utility providers can also push that data right into EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, depending on your region. We have a full list of properties, which can be, of course, filtered, searched through, sorted, whatever you need to do to cut down just to the list of properties that you're working with today. You can use things like labels. Of course, you're going to identify the contacts, the building type. And this is all going to help you isolate the data that you need to see in a specific moment, whether it's because you want to understand how your program's progressing or help people confirm their information, or it's because you want to actually isolate specific data to see how it's performing at a city level. So you also have these graphs along the side, which will actually show you the performance within your program or your region. Clicking into an example building, we're able to see even more information. So we can see the benchmarking data in the top here, and this one's been labeled with some missing data. I'm actually going to go back and find one that isn't missing any data. Okay, And so within the property, we're able to see benchmarking data, where it's at within the current cycle. So they've not yet confirmed their participation, but I could mark them as participating. I just maybe had a phone call. I can see the full history of our interactions, add comments. I can send an email if I have a contact already assigned directly from here, and it will log that into our activity log. See, I do have their utility data. I can view a scorecard or send that through to the contact. And the scorecard is where we start to see that benchmarking. So the scorecard is going to pull the specific data for this property branded with your program and show that property within the overall data set. The overall data set, of course, representing all of the properties that you have in the program. And so the building owner can start to understand how they're doing against the entire region or city. Contacts can be managed, and you can import or export your contacts to make sure you're getting what you need from that management of the relationships. As properties change owners or managers, you might need to adjust the relationship between the contacts and the properties, which of course can all be handled. And the end result that we're driving towards here is the disclosure map. And this would also be branded based on your program branding, and it would include a map of your city or your region with a property indicated by a dot. So every property within your program is going to show up on the map, be able to be clicked into to see the data, again, both for this property and then also how it's performing against the overall data set in the histograms and in these visualizations. Yeah, and you can filter those properties depending on what you might want to isolate for. So you might want to isolate a specific property type or a specific time range and just see a subset of your data. And this map, to be clear, once you've gotten to a public disclosure state, could be visible to the larger public or could be used internally to be able to isolate properties and their information.
Quick question, Janine?
Yeah.
Allison. So on that property map, I see that you can look at it by different property type. Does that mean that I could, for instance, say, okay, I want to filter for buildings older than 1990 that are rental, multifamily rental?
Yeah, so my example data set just has these property types, but you could filter to a property type, and then you could also filter to a time range.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
And the size of the building. That's brilliant. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Certain EnergyStar score, you could isolate your top performers in order to give them recognition on the more positive side, or book a coffee with those who are on the lower performing side, maybe. Yeah. So that's a high-level overview of the grid tool, which helps, as I said, with that program management. We do have, switching back to the slides now, hopefully that's up on your screen. We do have two different versions of Grid. So Grid has a free version, which syncs directly with Seed. It pulls data from EnergyStar Portfolio Manager and other sources to manage building attribute and utility data. It'll help you manage the shifting relationships that I mentioned with building contacts and owners over time. It'll still generate those performance reports, aka a scorecard per property. Performance data, of course, for the program overall can be downloaded in Excel. It'll track the compliance or voluntary involvement, and it'll generate the public disclosure map. And that's available thanks to funding from Natural Resources Canada. They've funded this free version of Grid such that anyone can use it and run it if they would like, and run a benchmarking and disclosure program. We also have a software as a service version, which has, of course, the same functionality as the Lite, but we've built on top of that. If you are paying us as a service provider, then we can do regular maintenance updates, hosting, and technical support. So you don't need to worry about where this software is going to sit. You just log into a website. You can also customize labels and statuses in the workflow to fit your program specifically. You can track conversations with property owners prior to properties existing. So you can use this also as like a relationship management tool, even before properties are part of the picture. And the software as a service is a constant ongoing development. So in our roadmap right now, we have scorecard isolation, which is the potential to isolate the various different loads as far as energy use goes, automated notifications, and we're working on some additional reports. But that list is ever changing as we build out the tool more and more. I've also hinted at program management. So program management in a software-only version, in a software-only version where we're a service provider, we're able to provide technical support and the hosting and maintenance of the technical environment. But we also do have offerings for a partially managed or fully managed program. So if you do have a limited team who can spend time on this, then we might be able to facilitate with that. Yeah. Exactly the 20 minutes I was given. We've hit the end, but I'm sure there will be some questions, and I know we do have some time specifically set for questions, and also some polling, I believe, Allison?
Yeah, I actually chose not to set that up. I thought we would just go with
Okay.
the questions for instead of taking up the time with the polling. So I think maybe can I ask one question before I open it up to everybody else? What's the I'm sure that the pricing varies but what is it based on size of city, number of buildings in the program, for the software as a service, and then also for the program management? What's the basis of the billing?
Yeah, so in an environment where it's software only, but software as a service, we do right now have our first year at 35,000. That's based on the full setup of the tool for you, as well as the first year of hosting, technical support, regular maintenance, basically the features that I've listed on the right-hand side here. And then year 2 and additional years after that would be at 29,000 per year. That said, the program management, it really is based on, if you're interested in that, of course, how many buildings you have within your city, what is the kind of archetype of those buildings, how, EnergyStar portfolio manager literate are they or not. So this would be something we could discuss in more detail based on the city. And we're happy to, send out details of the grid light versus the grid software as a service, offering a fuller breakdown than I could put on these slides if anyone's curious.
That's great. And then last question, are there any limitations in terms of certain provinces where you're just not going to be able to get the natural gas data? Or...
No, I mean, the goal here is to help building owners and building managers set up their own information within EnergyStar Portfolio Manager and then pull the data from there. Because that is the industry standard tool, and because that does sometimes offer syncing capabilities with utility providers. But if it doesn't, they do allow for spreadsheet imports. If you're able to get the data in a spreadsheet as a program manager, you can also pull that directly into Seed. You don't necessarily need to use EnergyStar Portfolio Manager. So there are a lot of different ways we can get the data, and as long as we can get the data, we can run a program.
Okay, that's great. And my last one is, we talked about having you provide some data from current cities in terms of the number of buildings in EnergyStar Portfolio Manager. Did you have a chance to run any of those numbers? Or?
Oh, great question. I'm gonna have to stop my share for a quick moment here. I think I do. You asked me that when we originally booked it.
Just to give people a feel if they're not familiar with how many buildings are actually already potentially able to be analyzed in their community.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was only able to get, so let's see here. Yeah, if there's any other questions, I'm going to search for that because I do have that.
So yeah, if anybody else has questions, feel free to ask them.
This is Donovan. I can just weigh in from open on the on a very partial answer to that. The Canada Green Building Council also just launched a voluntary disclosure challenge on top of the grid platform over the last year or so, and that has over 750 properties in it already. So if you're that's another place to go and get a sense of it. So these are properties from large-scale property owners and managers across the country that are already doing voluntary disclosure at that level. So that is certainly a great starting point. So when we launched Building Benchmark BC, that allowed us to essentially pre-populate over 100 buildings with concert properties and Quadrille and a few others like that. And so that's a great starting point. Then there's the other data point, which is how many buildings are already in ESPM. That I don't know the answer to offhand, but I think we're grabbing it here.
Yeah, when we were looking this was as of beginning of December, so it could have changed slightly. But for the folks who are on the call, I believe we have Halifax. So as of the beginning of December, there were 375 buildings already set up in EnergyStar Portfolio Manager. When it comes to Toronto, there are 6,700 buildings already set up with EnergyStar Portfolio Manager. Edmonton, 725 buildings. Who else on the call? I don't unfortunately have the Saanich numbers in front of me. But across Canada, we have more than 24,000 buildings that are set up in EnergyStar Portfolio Manager. So yeah, it's definitely, it's the easiest way to access building information because that's where you're likely to have properties already setting up their own information if they're doing internal benchmarking for their own purposes.
Great. We also have Montreal on the line. Do you happen to have Montreal's number?
I do. 1,100 buildings as of the beginning of December.
Great. And of course, those are all the very large office buildings. So if people are looking at a tower-wise or commercial building program, those will be their larger square footage buildings as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And Deborah, I can find you the numbers for your city as well.
Kevin, Munim, for Toronto, since you guys actually have a program, an energy benchmarking program in Toronto and Ontario these days, what's it looking like out there? What support does the province provide in terms of helping cities to actually utilize that data and run an analysis? What are you guys able to do right now?
Hello, can you hear me right now?
Sure can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it's really been a collaborative model from the beginning. Benchmarking something the city looked at as far as 2013, and at that time, from our stakeholdering, it made sense for it to be a province-wide program so that the major building owners they don't have to, keep track of different ordinances in each different municipality. So at that time, we did pass the torch on to the ministry, but to this date, we remain really well connected in terms of implementing the benchmarking program. So yep, the authority it does sit with the province. They are the regulation body. They're the ones who have the responsibility of the program. So how we fit in right now, in our role is basically facilitating the implementation. We might know that there's no penalties or fines, if you don't comply with the benchmarking program. So our role is basically focusing on areas that the ministry is not able to when they're looking at the full province scale and really driving home the compliance for Toronto. It's something that we believe strongly in as an engagement tool to bring greenhouse gas emissions down for our building sector as part of our Transform TO target for 2050. And so, we have council support, and its benchmarking is, it's cornerstone to all other programs as well. So we basically work in tandem with the province. We'll reach out to building owners and do informing, raise awareness of the regulation, help them wherever they might be stuck at, and then also after the data has gone through the province. We also analyze it, see which of the performers require attention and how we can help them.
Great, appreciate that. So we do have a couple questions in the chat box. So Valerie from Montreal asks how the building consumption is validated.
Yeah, so when it comes to the validation process in step 6, if you're using tools like Seed and or Grid, there is some automated validation that can be put in place. So we validate, for example, within Grid to make sure utility numbers are within a reasonable range of difference from a previous year if you have year over year. We also have some safeguards in place to make sure they're just reasonable for the building size and the building type. So you can highlight programmatically which buildings might be suspect or where data is actually missing. When it comes to validating the exact numbers, if you're in a region that has a data sync from a utility provider into EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, obviously that's lovely, and then you can use that data. But if you don't, then we do know that there are some people who run kind of randomized auditing or just inform all participants that that's a possibility. And you would want to track, of course, if you are doing something like that, who is getting audited, when they're getting audited, and a tool can help you keep track so that over the years you're making sure the entire data set is getting hit maybe once every 3 years, just to make sure that their data is within a reasonable range and it's actually validated.
And this is Donovan. I'll just weigh in on that and building on that latter point there, that doing an external program validation is something that would happen at a programmatic level. It's not something that would be, the software itself doesn't automatically do that validation step. So for example, Chicago does every 3 years they do sort of randomized validations across their program, and that is done by humans and is integrated with the platform that it's building on. But it's that is again something that requires it's a program design element as much as or more than a software design element.
Good. And Manu from Toronto was wondering what U.S. jurisdictions are using Grid, if any, as well as I think the Seed data integration tool I think is used in the United States, as far as I understand. It was created down there, I believe. But is Grid being used anywhere?
So Grid is new. So as we mentioned, NRCan funded us to build Grid, which is essentially a steering wheel and communication platform that drives on top of Seed. So that if the mechanics are from a data source, typically EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, although it could be others, data is collected from buildings and it goes into Seed, the standardized energy efficiency database that was developed by US EPA. We Canadianized it a few years ago, and then from that got the sense of what are the sort of the user tools that need to build on top of Seed to be able to pull the right data in and also to push out the right data stories. So as it stands right now, the first part of the question, no US cities yet are using Grid, although we very much hope that will change soon. But on the question of Seed, several are, and so there's a broad mix of the way that cities are designing their programs and the data collection side of their programs, and that ranges from very manual working with consultants to do pull from ESPM and not use Seed. That includes scenarios where they're pulling from ESPM into Seed, or in other cases they're linking with the Salesforce tool to manage their programs within Salesforce. And so it's right now a bit of a hodgepodge of different solution sets. And again, when we were looking at this, we saw the value of Seed because it uses the incumbent data reporting tools at the building level, which is the portfolio manager. And it gives an opportunity to aggregate not just ESPM, but lots of other data sources into a usable format. And so I would say my stats are a little bit stale on this particular question, but I would say it's probably about 25 to 35% of cities are using seed in some fashion, and then the rest are a range of different tools.
Oh, great, thanks. Also, just wondering, I mean, if you're not sure right now, that's totally fine. But if you knew any specific city names that were using seed, and also if there is a number of buildings cap on how many buildings seed can map as of right now, or is the sky's limit for that? As long as you have storage space, it can take in as many buildings or data sets as you like to map.
Yeah, so I can answer the second one, and the sky is indeed the limit. And
well, your hosting is your limit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your hosting issues will be your limitation there. And yeah, I'm just going to triple check which specific cities. I'm pretty sure, but I don't want to provide anything misleading, especially since we're being recorded here. But we'll follow up with the city.
Yeah.
No problem, Don. And
Okay,
I normally, by the way, I normally edit some of the questions out and just leave the presentation in as the recorded. Question from Marnie in Edmonton, and I think I know the answer to this one, but she's asking if you can help to identify the buildings within a city that would be eligible for benchmarking. So not that grid is just sitting on top of EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, so it can only pull in the data that's already in that or in some other program like it. So I guess, Marnie, are you saying, like, for instance, could you help Edmonton find out how many buildings over 50,000 square feet there are and where they are, so that you could start to contact them? I think that might be where you're going. Yes, that's exactly where I got that. So do you guys help to provide a service that would help them identify their buildings over a certain size threshold that they would want to target for benchmarking?
Yeah, I think if that's something of interest, that's something we would want to discuss when we were discussing being involved in program management. That's definitely a program management component. So as I said, there's like the tool itself, the software, and then we do also offer program management services. That's not part of the typical package, but I mean, when it comes to the program management, everyone kind of needs different elements. So if you want our help with those, I think that's just a one-on-one conversation ultimately.
And again, that's a program design rather than a software. We are equipped to absorb data from whichever reliable building types you have in there. What typically happens is that programs start with the larger buildings first, because they are simpler in a lot of ways and they're higher capacity owners, and then work their way down from 50,000 square feet to 200, or sorry, to 20,000 square feet in subsequent years. Within Building Benchmark BC right now, we're also experimenting with MURBs in multi-unit residential buildings. The challenges come in when you don't have single building level meters and ownership on the utility accounts. But again, these are all questions to deal with at the program design level. And if the program is designed in a way that there is a data stream that can come into seed and grid, then the tool is agnostic on that.
Great. And Janine, could you just weigh in on what the source of the information was that you found for the number of buildings in EnergyStar Portfolio Manager by city?
That was from a contact at Natural Resources Canada who manages their EnergyStar Portfolio Manager for Canada.
Great, thank you. Hey, Kevin, you mentioned in Halifax you've got that you're benchmarking your municipal buildings, and for those who don't know, Halifax is giant, so I imagine you have so many buildings. So do you know what your facilities guys are using right now? Are they, assuming they've put the building into EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, but are they using something to help them look at it from a portfolio view as opposed to looking at it from an individual building standpoint?
You're breaking up there, but I think you're just asking like what program we're using.
Yeah, just so they can look at a portfolio view as opposed to just building by building, so they can really see who their poor performers are.
Right. Yeah. So I believe we're using the EnergyStar portfolio manager. And it's actually not me that's doing it. Our on-site energy manager, Dave Brusha from Efficiency Nova Scotia. So I can find out. I'm pretty sure it is portfolio though, so that we can see them all and see which buildings are, performing as they should and which ones need a little bit of help.
So Janine or Donovan, could you help from a corporate side? What's the benefit to a municipality in using grid in addition to ESPM, or is there from that perspective?
Yeah. So when it comes to EnergyStar Portfolio Manager, you're able to benchmark your own properties year over year and against your own portfolio. And if you're only looking at your own properties, then that tool can work quite well. Grid can add another layer of information as far as just visualizations, including the map visualization, including kind of those histograms and those charts and the scorecards.
Right.
So it just makes the same information more visual in nature.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, like our province, as I said earlier, they're looking to implement a voluntary program, and I believe they're looking to copy off of Toronto's or Ontario's program. So I don't know if you've reached out to them, but it might be. I don't know where they're actually at with that, but this could be a good tool for them if they're going to make it public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hot tip. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions for Janine or Donovan? Okay, well, of the cities in Canada that are currently using grid, is it the cities in the BC Hydro pilot?
Yeah, so as far as what we can talk about in this moment, we do have Building Benchmark BC, which launched and includes, we've been working together with the City of Vancouver, Richmond, Surrey, and Burnaby. And we were working with New West as well. And as Deborah mentioned, we've been chatting with the City of Victoria, Saanich, and North Van about finding a way for them to join. Building Benchmark BC is a voluntary program. And it kicked off just a couple weeks ago. We're in the recruitment phase right now. And Open is helping as far as the program management, as well as, of course, using our own tool to manage that program. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited. And
so how long do you think until you'll have, what are you guys aiming for in terms of timelines in order to be able to share progress with grid and that pilot?
Yeah, well, with that pilot, we have the recruitment. We'll be doing data collection and then creating kind of the data stories that come out of that information. And we're hoping to host an event in the fall for recognition and kick off kind of a bunch of data stories is kind of what we call it. So what did we learn about the buildings in this region and about the data that we've collected? Yeah. So we'll know more on that timeline. I also noticed there's a question that popped up from Valerie that's
very important question. Is this
very important question? Somewhat unrelated. But yes, grid can be available in French as well.
Great. Mm-hmm. Well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to for a couple of minutes early. Thank you so much for your time. We really look forward to following along on the Building Benchmark BC pilot, and I'll make sure that those outside of the province and customer membership stay apprised of that work. I'll make sure that I send out the PowerPoint from today to all that were on the call as well. And Donovan and Janine's contact information is there, and I'll include it in the email text.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye all.